The stars vanished over New York City on a Tuesday morning. One moment the sky was clear blue, and the next it was filled with the hulking shadows of ships that stretched for miles across the horizon. The same scene played out over every major city on Earth. 15 years later, people still spoke of that day in hushed tones. Jack Lawson straightened his collar before entering the Vexari Command Center. Once a respected Navy commander with dreams of sailing Earth's oceans, he now walked the sterile halls of an alien administration building. His new uniform, gray with blue piping as required for human liaisons, felt as uncomfortable as the day they first made him wear it. "You're 3 minutes late, Human Lawson," growled Senior Administrator Kexaval without looking up from his console. The Vexari's scaled skin shimmed under the bright lights. 4 arms moved across different control panels simultaneously. "The Eastern Sector shuttle was delayed," Jack said, keeping his voice neutral. "A mechanical issue. Your species' inability to maintain simple transport vehicles continues to disappoint," Kexval said. "Perhaps if you applied yourselves to basic engineering with the same enthusiasm you show for breeding, you might make adequate servants." Jack swallowed his pride, as he had countless times before. "The maintenance reports are on your desk. I've also brought the resource allocation request from Governor Williams." Kexaval finally looked up, his vertical pupils narrowing. "More requests? Your governor seems to think Earth deserves special consideration among protectorate worlds. The northern continent is facing severe food shortages after last season's crop failures. The fertilizer technology you promised will arrive when deemed appropriate." Kexaval cut him off. "The Dominion manages 73 worlds, Commander. Earth is hardly the most valuable." Jack took the dismissal for what it was and left the office. Outside, rain had started to fall. He pulled his coat around him and walked 3 blocks to the coffee shop that had somehow survived the occupation. It was one of the small mercies that the Vexari allowed humans to keep some of their customs, so long as they remained productive. The bell jingled as he entered. Sandra sat in their usual corner booth, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, engineering schematics spread across the table. She quickly covered them with maintenance reports when she saw him. "That bad?" she asked as he slid into the seat across from her. "Same as always." Jack wrapped his hands around the mug of coffee she'd already ordered for him. "They're delaying the fertilizer shipments again." Sandra leaned forward, voice dropping. "Did you get it?" Jack glanced around before reaching into his inner pocket. He slid a small data chip across the table. "Maintenance credentials for the Eastern Communication Hub. It expires in 12 hours. Sandra's eyes lit up as she palmed the chip. "This gives us access to their subspace relay network. If what I suspect is true, we could intercept messages from across their entire empire. If we get caught, we've been careful for 6 years, Jack. No one suspects a thing." Jack wanted to believe her. 6 years of small rebellions, stolen technology, and secret meetings had yet to trigger Vexari suspicions, but the stakes kept rising. Sandra gathered her papers. "Olivia's waiting at the lab. The power coupling we salvaged last month is finally integrated with our system. And Kyle? Back from Chicago with 20 volunteers. Good people, ex-military mostly." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We're getting closer." The rain had intensified by the time they left the coffee shop. They walked separately, as always in public. Jack headed for the Human Administration Building while Sandra made her way to the authorized engineering facility, where she officially maintained Vexari communication equipment. What the Vexari didn't know was that Sandra wouldn't stay there long. After logging her presence and starting routine diagnostics that would run for hours, she would slip out through a service tunnel and travel 12 miles underground to an abandoned missile silo the aliens had never discovered. There, Project A. Defiance was taking shape. The first time Jack had seen the massive hull forming in the cavernous underground chamber, he'd felt hope for the first time since the invasion. The vessel was smaller than a Vexari cruiser but sleeker, combining stolen, alien technology with human innovation. Sandra and her team had accomplished the impossible, adapting and in some cases improving upon designs they had only glimpsed. By evening, Jack had finished his official duties and made his own journey to the facility. The elevator descended, nearly a mile into the earth. When the doors opened, the chamber bustled with activity. Over 100 people worked on various systems. Scaffolding surrounded the ship's hull, and sparks flew from welding torches. Olivia Garcia spotted him first and waved him over to a workstation where she and Sandra huddled over calculations. "Your wife is a genius," Olivia said, pushing her glasses up her nose. "We've increased power efficiency by 32%. The Vexari designs were wasteful," Sandra explained. "They have so much energy they don't bother conserving it. But we had to retool everything to work with what we can scavenge." Jack studied the schematics. "Will it fly?" "It'll do more than fly," said a deep voice behind him. Kyle Bennett approached, still wearing the dusty clothes from his journey. The former Special Forces operative had grown a beard to hide his identity while traveling between resistance cells. "It'll fight." Kyle led them to a sealed chamber where a tarp covered a large object. Chicago came through. He pulled back the covering to reveal a massive cannon assembly. "Is that what I think it is?" Jack asked. "Vexari plasma artillery. They were transporting it to their moon base. My team intercepted it." Kyle's smile didn't reach his eyes. 3 good people didn't make it back. A moment of silence fell over them. "This changes the timeline," Olivia finally said. "We can arm the ship now instead of after the first test flight." "How soon?" Jack asked. Sandra calculated mentally. 6 months, maybe 5 if we push. "We should vote," Kyle said. "This affects everyone." They gathered the project leaders that night. 26 people representing engineers, security, medical, navigation, and communications sat in a makeshift conference room deep underground. Captain Eleanor Wright, their chosen commander, called the meeting to order. "We need to decide if we accelerate deployment," she said. Her firm voice carried the authority of her former Navy rank. "The weapon systems are ready sooner than expected, but several critical systems remain untested." The debate lasted hours. Dr. Daniel Rodriguez warned about life support limitations. Frank Miller worried about communication security. But the hunger for action was palpable. "The longer we wait, the more likely we're discovered," Kyle argued. "And every day the Vexari strip more resources from Earth." In the end, they voted for a 9-month timeline. The USS Intrepid would launch within a year. As the meeting adjourned, Eleanor pulled Jack aside. "You're a Vexari contact. Do you trust him?" Jack thought of the alien scientist who had secretly provided them with technical data. Motivated by some internal ethical conflict Jack didn't fully understand. "As much as I can trust any of them," he answered. "We need the quantum core specifications," Eleanor said. "Everything else we can manage, but without that." Jack nodded grimly. "I'll get them." Later that night, as Jack and Sandra lay in their small apartment on the edges of the human quarter, they spoke in whispers despite the signal jammers that prevented surveillance. "Do you ever think about what happens if we succeed?" Sandra asked. Jack stared at the ceiling. When we succeed," she corrected herself. "The Vexari control so many worlds. We'll be alone against an empire." Jack turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe not. If Earth can build a battleship in secret, who knows what other surprises the galaxy holds." Outside their window, Vexari patrol ships cast searchlights across the city. But deep underground, humanity's hope took shape in the growing silhouette of a vessel that would one day carry their defiance to the stars. 3 months passed in a blur of stolen moments and secret work. The USS Intrepid grew more complete with each passing day. Sandra spent less time at her official job and more in the underground facility, risking detection as she pushed the engineering teams to their limits. "The power systems are still unstable," she told Jack one night as they examined the latest test results in their small apartment. "We've squeezed everything possible from the generators we built, but it's not enough for sustained faster-than-light travel." Jack rubbed his tired eyes. "What are our options?" "We need a Vexari quantum core. Nothing else will generate enough power." She pulled up schematics on their secure tablet. "And we need their navigation data. Without it, we'd be flying blind." Jack knew what she was suggesting. "That's inside their main facility," The security is the tightest on Earth, she finished. But we don't have a choice. The next day, Jack met with Kyle and 4 of his best operatives in an abandoned subway tunnel. A quantum core is about the size of a basketball, Kyle said, pointing to a diagram. But it weighs over 500 pounds and requires special handling. We'll need a transport vehicle and at least 6 people. Security includes motion sensors, biometric scans, and armed guards, Jack added, plus whatever other systems they haven't told us about. A woman named Diane, formerly with Navy intelligence, studied the facility layout. We need someone on the inside to disable the primary alarm system. All eyes turned to Jack. If I'm caught, the whole project is exposed, he said. If we don't get that core, there is no project, Kyle countered. Jack knew he was right. They spent weeks planning, mapping guard rotations, and preparing specialized equipment. Sandra worked with Olivia to build a containment unit for the quantum core. When the night of the operation arrived, Jack felt calm despite the risks. He entered the Vexari Command Center for his evening shift as usual. The facility buzzed with more activity than normal. "What's happening?" he asked a human assistant hurrying past with armfuls of reports. "The regional overseer is arriving tomorrow for inspection," she whispered before rushing away. Jack's stomach tightened. This complicated everything, yet they couldn't abort now. The team was already in position. At precisely midnight, Jack entered his access codes into a maintenance terminal. He had 3 minutes to disable the sensors before security protocols would flag the unauthorized access. His fingers moved quickly over the alien interface, entering the override sequences Sandra had discovered months earlier. A message appeared. In Vexari script maintenance mode activated. 30 minutes. Jack sent a single-word text on his secured phone. Go. 5 blocks away, Kyle and his team moved. They drove a utility vehicle bearing Vexari authorization markings up to a service entrance. Diane, wearing the uniform of a human technician, presented falsified work orders to the guard. Cooling system. Maintenance, she said confidently. Administrator Keksaval authorized it this morning. The guard checked his terminal, finding the false work order Jack had planted hours earlier. He waved them through. Inside, they moved quickly through service corridors toward the power generation section. 2 Vexari technicians rounded a corner unexpectedly. Before they could react, Kyle's team neutralized them with stun weapons and hid them in a storage room. 14 minutes, Kyle whispered into his comm device. Jack monitored their progress on security feeds he'd diverted to his terminal. So far, no alarms had triggered. He watched as they reached the core housing chamber and began disconnecting the backup unit from its mounting. A voice behind him made Jack freeze. "Human Lawson, explain your presence at this terminal." Jack turned to find Keksaval standing there, his 4 arms crossed in suspicion. "System showed anomalies in the maintenance subroutines," Jack replied smoothly. "I was running diagnostics before filing a report." At midnight? Keksaval's vertical pupils narrowed. "The regional overseer arrives tomorrow. I wanted all systems optimal for the inspection." Jack gestured to the terminal. "Would you like to see the diagnostic report?" Keksaval hesitated, then moved closer to examine the screen. "Continue. But I will observe." Jack's mind raced. Kyle and his team would be exposed the moment they tried to leave with the core. He needed a distraction. "Sir, may I point out these power fluctuations?" Jack indicated a section of the display far from the security feeds. They appeared to be affecting the landing bay shields. When Keksaval leaned in to look, Jack's elbow accidentally hit the environmental controls. Alarms blared as oxygen levels plummeted in administrative sections. "Emergency protocols activated," Jack shouted over the noise. "We need to evacuate this level." Chaos erupted as staff rushed toward emergency exits. Jack used the confusion to send a final message. "Front gate, now." In the core chamber, Kyle received the message. "Change of plans. Move." Instead of taking their planned route through service corridors, they pushed the heavy container holding the quantum core directly toward the main entrance where evacuation procedures were in effect. Vexari guards were too busy managing the evacuation to question the human maintenance crew rushing. A large container outside, They loaded it onto their vehicle and drove away as emergency vehicles arrived. Jack emerged from the building with other evacuees. As Kexaval barked orders to security teams, Jack slipped away in the confusion. By dawn, the quantum core was secure, in the underground facility. "You took an insane risk," Sandra said when he finally arrived at the silo, exhaustion etched on his face. "It worked, didn't it?" He managed a tired smile. Eleanor Wright approached them, her expression grim. "The Vexari are conducting building-by-building searches. They know something was stolen." "How long until they reach this sector?" Jack asked. 3 days, maybe 4. Sandra looked up at the Intrepid. The ship was mostly complete but still needed weeks of testing. "We aren't ready." "We have to be," Eleanor said firmly. "Begin preparations for launch. We leave in 72 hours. The next 2 days passed in frantic activity. Sandra and Olivia worked without sleep to integrate the quantum core into the ship's power systems. Medical supplies and food stores were loaded. Systems were tested and retested. The crew of volunteers, now numbering 157, prepared for a journey from which they might never return. On the final night, Jack stood with Sandra on the observation platform overlooking the massive ship. Its sleek hull, a combination of scavenged Vexari metals and earth alloys, gleamed under the work lights. "She's beautiful," Sandra said softly. "Tomorrow everything changes," Jack replied. Sandra took his hand. "Are you sure about staying behind?" They had argued about this for days. Someone needed to coordinate the ground resistance for when the Intrepid returned. Jack had volunteered. "You're the only one who truly understands how she works," he told his wife. "They need you up there more than down here." Sandra rested her head on his shoulder. Neither mentioned the possibility that they might never see each other again, and the other side of the facility, Eleanor Wright studied star charts with Frank Miller. As captain of the Intrepid, the lives of everyone aboard would soon be her responsibility. "Best estimate on Vexari response time?" she asked. "Once we break atmosphere, they'll detect us immediately," Frank replied. "Their orbital defense platforms will target us within minutes." Eleanor nodded. "Then we'll have to be faster." The countdown to launch had begun. Launch day arrived with a sense of grim determination. Underground, the massive silo doors began their slow process of opening for the first time in decades. Dust and debris rained down as ancient mechanisms groaned to life. The Intrepid's engines hummed with energy from the quantum core, the sound growing from a whisper to a steady rumble that vibrated through the entire facility. Jack and Sandra shared one final moment together in a quiet corner, away from the bustling activity. "Remember the plan," Jack said, holding her hands tightly in his. 3 months to gather allies, then return to Earth. No heroics." Sandra smiled sadly. "You're the one staying on a planet crawling with angry aliens. I'll have plenty of help." Jack nodded toward where Kyle and his security team were loading the last of their gear. Half would stay behind with Jack to organize the resistance. "Just make sure you come back." Their goodbye kiss was interrupted by Eleanor's voice over the intercom. "All crew to boarding stations. Launch in 15 minutes. Final checks moved, with practiced efficiency. Sandra hurried to engineering while Jack made his way to the command center they had established adjacent to the launch silo. Screens showed Vexari patrols moving through the city, still searching sector by sector for the stolen core. "They're 8 miles out and moving this way," Diane reported, monitoring security feeds they had tapped into. "At their current pace, they'll reach our outer sensors in about 3 hours. "Too close," Jack muttered. He picked up the secured communication line to the ship. "Bridge, we need to move up the timeline. Hostiles approaching faster than anticipated." Eleanor's voice came back clear and calm. "Understood, prepare for immediate launch." Inside the Intrepid, warning klaxons sounded as crew members rushed to secure stations. Sandra arrived at engineering to find organized chaos as her team made final adjustments to the power systems. "The core is stable but untested at full capacity," Olivia reported, her fingers flying over control panels. "We're taking a hell of a risk." "No choice now," Sandra replied. She addressed her engineering crew. Strap in and prepare for emergency launch protocols. On the bridge, Eleanor settled into the captain's chair. The command center was smaller than a naval vessel's, but packed with adapted Vexari technology alongside human interfaces. The view screen showed the open silo doors above, revealing a sliver of night sky. "All stations report," she ordered. "Engineering ready," Sandra's voice came through. "Navigation ready," responded the pilot, Alan Reeves, former Air Force. 1 by 1. Each section reported readiness, some with more confidence than others. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," Eleanor said finally. She took a deep breath and pressed the ship-wide communication button. "Attention all crew. This is Captain Wright. In moments, we will attempt something no humans have done before. We will leave Earth and take the fight to those who thought they could keep us grounded forever. Some systems are untested, some may fail, but we will not. Because today, humanity reaches for the stars not with humble exploration, but with righteous defiance." She nodded to Alan. "Take us up. Easy and steady." The Intrepid's engines flared brighter as the ship began to rise through the silo. Dust and small debris scattered from the wind generated by the propulsion system. Metal groaned as the ship maneuvered through the narrow opening with mere feet of clearance on either side. From his position in the command center, Jack watched tensely as the vessel rose into the night sky. For a moment it hovered there, its hull reflecting the moonlight. "They've spotted it," Diane announced suddenly. "Vexari defense systems are activating." Jack grabbed the comm. "Eleanor, you've been detected, move." Aboard the Intrepid, the warning came as red alerts flashed across every console. "Full power to engines," Eleanor commanded. "Get us into the upper atmosphere before they can organize a response." The ship surged upward with unexpected speed, pressing the crew into their seats. On the navigation display, smaller dots appeared. Vexari security vessels launching from their bases around the planet. 5 pursuit craft incoming, Frank reported from communications. "They're hailing us and ordering immediate surrender." "Ignore them," Eleanor said. "Time to orbital boundary?" 3 minutes, Alan answered, his hand steady on the controls despite the sweat beading on his forehead. Sandra's voice came through from engineering. "The core is holding stable, but our shield generators are untested against weapons fire. Let's hope we don't need to find out," Eleanor replied. The hope was short-lived. The first energy blast from a Vexari vessel flashed past the Intrepid's starboard side. "They're firing warning shots," Frank announced. "Warning shots mean they want the ship intact," Eleanor realized. "They still don't know what we've built." She turned to the weapons station. "Bring defensive systems online, but hold fire unless I command it." The Intrepid continued its ascent, but the Vexari ships were faster, designed specifically for atmospheric pursuit. They formed a pattern around the human vessel, firing targeted shots at its propulsion systems. "Shields holding at 82%, reported the defense officer. "But they're concentrating fire on our engines." Eleanor gripped the arms of her chair. They were so close to space, but the Vexari were closing in. If they disabled the Intrepid now, everything would be lost. "Captain," Sandra called from engineering. "The quantum core can give us more power, but it might destabilize once we reach space." "We won't reach space if we're captured," Eleanor responded. "Do it." In engineering, Sandra and Olivia bypassed safety protocols and opened the core to full capacity. The ship's lights flickered, then blazed brighter as energy surged through every system. The Intrepid leaped forward with such sudden acceleration that several crew members were thrown against their restraints. The pursuing Vexari ships fell behind momentarily, surprised by the burst of speed. "Orbital boundary in 30 seconds, Alan announced, fighting to maintain control of the suddenly supercharged vessel. On the view screen, the blue sky darkened rapidly to black as they punched through the upper atmosphere. Stars appeared, clear and unwavering without Earth's atmosphere to make them twinkle. "We've reached space," Frank said, his voice filled with awe despite the danger. The moment was interrupted by proximity alarms. 3 larger Vexari vessels, part of Earth's orbital defense fleet, moved to intercept them. "They're charging weapons," the tactical officer warned. "These aren't security ships. They're military cruisers. Eleanor's expression hardened. It's time they learned what we can do. Target their propulsion systems only. Fire when ready. The weapons officer looked uncertain. Captain, we've never fired these systems outside simulation. The Vexari don't know that, Eleanor said firmly. Fire. The Intrepid's main weapons, modified versions of Vexari plasma cannons enhanced by Sandra's team, released brilliant streams of energy that struck the lead cruiser with unexpected precision. The alien vessel's engines sputtered and died, leaving it drifting. Shock rippled through the bridge. Their weapons had worked better than anyone had dared hope. Target the second vessel, Eleanor ordered, new confidence in her voice. The second cruiser tried evasive maneuvers but suffered the same fate as the first. The third broke off its approach, clearly reassessing the threat. We're being hailed by all remaining Vexari vessels, Frank reported. They're demanding to know what we are. A slow smile spread across Eleanor's face. Tell them we are the USS Intrepid, Earth's first battleship, and we're just getting started. The quantum drive engaged with a flash of light that momentarily blinded the Vexari sensors. When they recovered, the human vessel had vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind disabled Vexari ships and a planet about to erupt into open rebellion. Inside the ship, as stars streaked past on the view screen, the crew of the Intrepid erupted into cheers and tears. They had done it. They had broken free. In engineering, Sandra watched the power readings stabilize. Against all odds, the core was performing beyond expectations. She allowed herself a moment of fierce pride before turning to the tasks ahead. They were free of Earth, but now the real journey began. The first week in space passed in a blur of activity. The crew worked around the clock to fix systems damaged during their hasty departure. Sandra barely slept, moving from one engineering crisis to another as the untested ship revealed new problems each day. But despite the challenges, a sense of accomplishment filled the corridors of the Intrepid. They had done the impossible. They had escaped Earth. On the 8th day, Captain Wright called the senior staff to the conference room adjacent to the bridge. Sandra arrived last, dark circles under her eyes but a smile on her face. The quantum core is fully stabilized, she reported as she took her seat. We can maintain faster-than-light travel indefinitely, barring any new surprises. Eleanor nodded with approval. Excellent work. Now we need to discuss our next steps. She activated the room's display table, showing a three-dimensional star map. Frank, share what you've discovered. Frank Miller stood up, his lanky frame hunched slightly as he addressed the group. When we integrated the stolen quantum core, we got more than just a power source. It contained the entire Vexari navigational database. He expanded a section of the map, highlighting dozens of star systems. These are all worlds under Vexari control. Over 70 inhabited planets, each with its own native species, all subjugated like Earth. Murmurs spread through the room as the enormity of the Dominion's reach became clear. That's not all, Frank continued. I've been analyzing the communications, data stored in the core. The Vexari have classified reports on each species they control, and humans are special. Sandra leaned forward. Special how? According to their research, humans have unique neurological patterns that make us exceptionally resilient to faster-than-light travel. Frank pulled up complex brain scan comparisons. Most species experience severe disorientation or psychosis during extended FTL journeys, but humans adapt quickly with minimal side effects. That explains why they kept us isolated, said Dr. Rodriguez. They didn't want us to discover this advantage. Eleanor studied the map thoughtfully. So we have a ship that can outperform their vessels, weapons that can disable their cruisers, and crew members who can withstand extended space travel better than they can. She looked around the table. We need to use these advantages to build alliances. The map shows a cluster of systems near the edge of Vexari space, Sandra pointed out. If there's organized resistance anywhere, it would be there where their control is weakest. Eleanor nodded. Set course for this system. She indicated a planet at the fringe of Vexari territory. Arrival in 3 days. Until then, Continue. Repairs and prepare for possible hostile contact. As the meeting dispersed, Olivia caught up with Sandra in the corridor. I've been analyzing the weapon performance data. The modifications you made to the plasma cannons increased their efficiency by over 50% compared to standard Vexari designs. Sandra looked surprised. That much? I was just trying to compensate for our power limitations. Your limitations? Forced innovations they never considered, Olivia explained. Their technology is powerful but wasteful. You made it elegant. 3 days later, the Intrepid dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Altaran system. The bridge crew stared in awe at the view screen showing a ringed gas giant surrounded by dozens of small moons, many clearly hosting structures. Multiple signals detected, Frank reported. Mostly automated beacons, but there's definitely civilization here. Any Vexari presence? Eleanor asked. Minimal. One orbital station. Looks like a monitoring outpost rather than a military installation. Before Eleanor could respond, warning signals flashed across Frank's console. We're being scanned. Multiple ships approaching from the largest moon. They're not Vexari design. Raise shields but weapons on standby only, Eleanor ordered. Open. Communications on all frequencies. Let's introduce ourselves. Frank worked his console. Channel open. Eleanor stood tall. This is Captain Eleanor Wright of the Earth vessel USS Intrepid. We come seeking allies against the Vexari Dominion. Silence stretched for nearly a minute before a response came. The view screen showed a slender humanoid figure with iridescent skin that shifted colors as they spoke. Earth vessel? The quarantined world? The alien's voice translated through Frank's systems with a musical quality. Impossible. No quarantined species has ever broken containment. We're full of surprises, Eleanor replied with a small smile. Request permission to approach and discuss possible alliance. The alien studied them for a long moment. I am Commander Zexilia of the Altaran Resistance. Maintain position. A shuttle will bring you to Central Hub for verification. Weapons are not permitted. Hours later, Eleanor, Sandra, and Frank followed an Altaran guard through gleaming corridors carved into the moon's rocky interior. The settlement was larger than they expected, housing what appeared to be refugees from multiple species. They were led to a circular chamber where Commander Zexilia waited with representatives of several alien races. The commander's skin had shifted to a deep blue, which Sandra guessed indicated seriousness or caution. You claim to have built a battleship capable of challenging Vexari cruisers, Zexilia said without preamble. Forgive our skepticism, but no subjugated world has achieved space travel independently for 3,000 years. Eleanor gestured to Sandra. Our chief engineer can explain our technological capabilities better than I can. Sandra stepped forward, suddenly aware of all the alien eyes on her. She took a deep breath and began explaining how they had studied, adapted, and improved upon Vexari technology. As she spoke, she displayed schematics of the Intrepid systems on a small projector they had brought. One of the aliens, with 4 arms and a carapace-like exoskeleton, interrupted. These weapon modifications are theoretically sound, but implementing them would require metallurgical expertise beyond most worlds' capabilities. We didn't have a choice but to innovate, Sandra replied. Our resources were limited, so we had to find new solutions. Zexlia's color shifted slightly toward green. Yet you claim to have disabled Vexari military vessels during your escape, too. Cruisers, Frank confirmed. We have sensor logs to prove it. A ripple of excited conversation spread through the alien representatives. If true, this changes everything, Zexilia said. The resistance has existed for centuries, but we've never had the means to directly challenge their military vessels. We focus on sabotage, intelligence gathering, and helping refugees escape the harshest regimes. We need more than that, Eleanor said firmly. Earth won't survive as a collection of refugees. We need a fighting chance, and that means building more ships like the Intrepid. Impossible, said the 4-armed alien. We lack the facilities, the materials. We have the designs, Sandra interrupted, and we can improve them further. What we need are allies with the courage to fight back. Zexalia studied them for a long moment, skin shifting through colors too quickly to track. There is someone you should meet. A human, taken from Earth many years ago. The Vexari prize him for his knowledge of shipbuilding. Eleanor's eyebrows rose in surprise. A human? Here? Not here. On Aquarius 9, a water world where the Vexari build many of their vessels. If you truly wish to construct a fleet, Martin Ramirez is the one who could help you do it. Later, back aboard the Intrepid, the senior staff gathered to discuss this new information. A human shipbuilder held captive? Dr. Rodriguez shook his head in disbelief. How many others have they taken from Earth? The important question is whether we can trust the Alterans, Frank pointed out. This could be a trap. Eleanor considered this. They seemed genuinely surprised by our capabilities, and they've offered to provide star charts with secret routes that avoid Vexari patrols. We need allies, Sandra said simply. And we need someone who understands Vexari shipbuilding better than we do. This Ramirez could be the key. Eleanor nodded. Decision made. Plot a course for Aquarius 9. It's time to grow our resistance from a single ship to a fleet. As the Intrepid prepared to depart, word of the human vessel spread quietly through the Altaran settlement. For the first time in generations, hope began to replace resignation in the eyes of those who had known only life under Vexari dominion. Back on Earth, Jack Lawson received his first encoded message from the Intrepid. As he read the report of their successful contact with the Altaran resistance, he allowed himself a moment of pride before returning to the increasingly difficult task of organizing Earth's growing rebellion. The Vexari had doubled their security forces since the Intrepid's escape, but they couldn't stop the whispers spreading through every human settlement. Earth had a ship among the stars, and it was fighting back. 18 months after the Intrepid's escape from Earth, Jack Lawson stood on a hillside overlooking what had once been Chicago. The city was partially in ruins now, the result of Vexari attempts to crush the human rebellion that had spread like wildfire following the battleship's departure. Jack lowered his binoculars as his second-in-command approached. The last transport is loaded, Kyle reported. 200 more fighters ready to move underground before the Vexari air patrol arrives. Jack nodded. The resistance had grown beyond what he had ever imagined possible, with cells operating in every major city around the world. Any word from our friends upstairs? Kyle's face broke into a rare smile. Message came through an hour ago on the Quantum channel. They're coming home, Jack. And they're not coming alone. For months, communications from the Intrepid had grown, less frequent as the ship traveled deeper into contested space. Their last message had been brief. They had found Martin Ramirez and established hidden shipyards in an asteroid belt near the Duran Nebula. But details had been scarce for security reasons. How many ships? Jack asked, hope and anxiety mixing in his chest. The message didn't say. Just that we should be ready. The Vexari are going to throw everything they have at stopping them. Jack took one last look at the horizon before turning toward their hidden base. Then let's make sure we give our friends a proper welcome. Across the galaxy, the USS Intrepid led a remarkable fleet through faster-than-light space. Behind it followed 37 warships of various sizes, crewed by a coalition of formerly subjugated species, all united under a single cause: freedom from the Vexari dominion. On the Intrepid's bridge, Captain Eleanor Wright studied the tactical display showing their formation. After 18 months of running, hiding, fighting, and building, they were finally heading home. Sandra entered the bridge, her uniform now adorned with the rank insignia of Fleet Chief Engineer. The past year and a half had changed her. She stood taller, moved with more confidence, spoke with the authority that came from repeatedly achieving the impossible. All ships report ready for the final jump, she said. Martin wants you to know the shield disruptors are fully operational across the fleet. Eleanor nodded. The shield disruptors were Sandra's most revolutionary creation. Weapons that could neutralize Vexari defensive systems with surgical precision. They had been tested in smaller engagements, but never against the full might of what awaited them at Earth. The Vexari have had 18 months to fortify Earth, Eleanor said. Intel suggests they've stationed nearly a quarter of their fleet there, expecting us to return. They're right about that, Sandra replied with a determined smile. But they're wrong about everything else. Frank looked up from his communication station. All ships acknowledge final coordinates. Jump countdown initiated. Eleanor took a deep breath. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, jump. The fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel for what would be their final jump before reaching Earth. In orbit around Earth, Supreme Commander Vaxilar of the Vixari Dominion observed the massive defensive perimeter his forces had established. 97 warships surrounded the planet, including his personal dreadnought, a planet-killer-class vessel that dwarfed all others. The humans had proven unexpectedly troublesome, both those who had escaped and those still fighting on the surface. Supreme Commander, his sensor officer called, multiple faster-than-light signatures detected approaching the system. Vaxilar straightened his massive frame. Finally, position all ships to intercept. Prepare to show these rebellious primitives the full might of the Dominion. The space around Earth suddenly flashed with light as the human-led fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. The Intrepid led the formation, flanked by ships of various designs all bearing the same insignia, a rising phoenix against a field of stars. On the Intrepid's bridge, Eleanor wasted no time. All ships, defensive formation Delta, target the outer perimeter vessels only. Hold fire until my command. The coalition fleet moved with practiced precision, forming a spherical defensive pattern that had proven effective against Vexari attack formations. We're being hailed, Frank announced. It's the Vexari flagship. On screen, Eleanor ordered. Supreme Commander Vaxilar's reptilian face filled the view screen. 4 arms crossed over his armored chest as he regarded the humans with contempt. Captain, right, he said, his translator giving his voice an artificial smoothness. Your rebellion ends today. The Dominion has stood for 10,000 years. Do you truly believe your handful of stolen ships can challenge us? Eleanor met his gaze without flinching. We're not here to challenge you, Supreme Commander. We're here to replace you. She signaled Frank to cut the transmission, then addressed her fleet. All ships, activate shield disruptors. Target weapons systems only. Across the coalition fleet, Sandra's revolutionary weapons powered up. Beams of energy unlike anything the Vexari had encountered before shot toward their ships. Rather than explosive impacts, the beams seemed to pass through the Vexari shields as if they weren't there, precisely striking weapons emplacements and leaving the ships otherwise intact. On his dreadnought, Vaxilar watched in stunned silence as ship after ship reported weapons systems failures. The humans had somehow developed technology that bypassed their most advanced defensive systems. Impossible, he hissed. Launch all fighters. Destroy that lead ship. The space around Earth erupted in chaos as hundreds of Vexari fighter craft poured from their carrier ships. The coalition fleet broke formation to meet them, revealing fighting capabilities that shocked the Vexari commanders. These weren't the actions of untrained rebels. These were coordinated military maneuvers executed with precision. On Earth's surface, resistance fighters emerged from hiding to launch coordinated attacks on Vexari ground installations. Jack led the assault on the main control center in what had once been New York, their timing precisely synchronized with the space battle above. As the fighting intensified, Eleanor ordered the Intrepid on a direct course toward Vaxilar's dreadnought. Their main weapons are offline, Sandra reported from engineering, but they still have maneuvering thrusters and secondary defenses. Get me ship to ship, Eleanor commanded, and patch into all communication channels across the galaxy. Frank looked up in surprise. All channels? That would broadcast to every Vexari-controlled world simultaneously. Exactly, Eleanor said with a nod. It's time everyone heard the truth. As the Intrepid approached the massive dreadnought, Eleanor's voice rang out not just to the Vexari fleet, but to every subjugated world across the Dominion. Attention all worlds under Vexari control. This is Captain Eleanor Wright of Earth. For too long the Dominion has ruled through fear and isolation, keeping us apart, making each world believe they were alone in their subjugation. That ends today. The Intrepid moved into position directly, facing the Dreadnought's command center, close enough that Vaxilar could see the human vessel through his viewport. "We offer a choice," Eleanor continued. "To the Vexari, surrender your weapons and withdraw from occupied worlds, and we will allow you peaceful existence within your original system. To all subjugated peoples, rise up. You are not alone. The coalition we have formed stands ready to assist any world that chooses freedom. On planets across the galaxy, beings of countless species gathered around communication devices, hearing the impossible, a direct challenge to Vexari authority, backed by the visible defeat of their forces around Earth." In orbit, Sandra watched from the Intrepid's engineering section as their gamble paid off. One by one, Vexari vessels began powering down weapons rather than face destruction. On the surface, Jack's forces secured control center after control center, as Vexari troops found themselves cut off from command. When Supreme Commander Vaxilar finally surrendered his dreadnought, the news spread instantly across the galaxy. The message was clear. After 10,000 years, the Dominion had fallen. 1 month later, representatives from 28 formerly subjugated species gathered in the rebuilt United Nations headquarters in New York. Eleanor and Sandra stood, with Jack as the newly formed Galactic Cooperative ratified its founding charter. "Did you ever imagine this?" Sandra asked, watching the diverse array of beings working together. Jack took her hand in his. "Not in detail, but I always knew humanity wasn't meant to stay grounded." Above them, visible through the transparent dome ceiling, Earth's growing fleet of ships glittered in the sunlight, led by the now legendary silhouette of the USS Intrepid, the battleship whose arrival had made the galaxy hold its breath.